The automotive world is full of dreams, some that roar onto the roads and others that never escape the drawing board. Mazda's attempt to launch its own luxury brand belongs to the second category. It is a story of ambition, timing, and an unfortunate clash with economic reality. During the late 1980s, Japanese automakers were shaking the very foundations of the luxury market. Toyota stunned the world with Lexus, Honda impressed with Acura, and Nissan carved a niche with Infiniti. These brands proved that Japan could not only build reliable economy cars but also compete head-to-head with the likes of BMW and Mercedes. Mazda, known for its daring engineering and love for the unconventional rotary engine, didn't want to be left behind. The company's leaders envisioned a future where Mazda, too, would stand proudly in the luxury space. That vision took shape as a new brand, one they called Amati. But unlike Lexus, Acura, or Infiniti, Amati never became a household name. In fact, outside of car history enthusiasts, most people have never even heard of it. And that's exactly what makes this story so fascinating. Mazda's greatest luxury gamble ended before it could even begin. This is the forgotten tale of Mazda's luxury failure, a saga of big dreams, bold ideas, and the cruel timing that brought it all crashing down. The rise of Japanese luxury. To understand Mazda's decision to create Amati, we need to step back into the 1980s. This was the decade when Japan went from being known as the land of cheap, fuel-efficient cars to becoming a serious global automotive powerhouse. American buyers had long associated Japanese cars with affordability and reliability. Brands like Toyota Corolla, Honda Civic, and Datsun, later Nissan, made huge waves after the oil crises of the 1970s, offering efficient alternatives to gas-guzzling American sedans. By the 1980s, Japanese manufacturers had gained customer trust. They had proved they could build cars that lasted longer, required fewer repairs, and gave excellent value for money. But while Japanese automakers excelled in the economy segment, the luxury market was still dominated by Europeans. Mercedes-Benz and BMW set the benchmark for executive sedans, while Jaguar catered to those wanting something more refined. In America, Cadillac and Lincoln still had a loyal base, though they were beginning to struggle against European sophistication. This was the gap Japanese companies wanted to exploit. Honda was first with Acura in 1986. Acura's Legend and Integra showed that Japanese luxury could balance performance, comfort, and value. Toyota followed in 1989 with Lexus. The LS400 shocked the industry. It looked like a Mercedes S-Class rival, but at nearly half the price. Its build quality, smoothness, and quietness blew critics away. Lexus instantly became a respected name. Nissan entered the same year with Infiniti. While Infiniti's early cars didn't hit as hard as Lexus, the brand still carved out its identity and gave Nissan a presence in luxury showrooms. By the early 1990s, these three brands had created a new reality. Japanese luxury was no longer a joke, it was serious competition. Mazda watched all this unfold. The company was already admired for its innovation. Its rotary-powered RX-7 was a sports car icon. The Mazda 626 and 929 proved it could build respectable sedans. And then there was the Miata MX-5, launched in 1989, which reinvented the affordable roadster and became a global sensation. Inside Mazda's boardrooms, executives asked themselves a burning question. If Toyota, Honda, and Nissan can challenge Mercedes, why can't we? Mazda's confidence was high. Their engineers were bold. Their cars were winning praise. And so, in the late 1980s and early 1990s, Mazda quietly began working on their own luxury. Project A, brand that would show the world Mazda was not just about quirky sports cars or economy sedans. A brand that would prove Mazda belonged in the same conversation as Lexus, Acura, and Infiniti. They called it Amati, Mazda's dream, the birth of Amati. By the dawn of the 1990s, Mazda was ready to step into the big leagues. The company had carved a reputation as the different Japanese automaker, the one that dared to take risks. Others avoided. Their rotary engines, while not always commercially successful, gave them an image of engineering bravery. The MX-5 Miata was already a global hit, and the RX-7 was admired by enthusiasts everywhere. But Mazda wanted more. Watching Lexus, Acura, and Infiniti make headlines, Mazda's management became convinced that they too deserved a seat at the luxury table. And so the Amati project was born. Mazda envisioned Amati as a full-fledged luxury division, not just a rebadging exercise. This wasn't about taking an existing sedan and slapping on leather seats and chrome. No, Amati was supposed to represent refinement, elegance, and prestige, all while carrying Mazda's DNA of bold engineering. The lineup was ambitious. Amati 300, a smaller luxury sedan positioned against the Acura, Vigor, and Infiniti G20. Amati 500, a mid-sized luxury sedan to compete with the Lexus ES and Infiniti J30. Amati 1000, the flagship designed to stand shoulder to shoulder with the Lexus LS 400, Mercedes S-Class, and BMW 7 Series. Mazda poured years of research and development into these cars. They weren't just chasing luxury for the sake of image. They genuinely believed they could redefine what a Japanese luxury car could be. One of the boldest parts of the plan was the development of an all-new V12 engine for the Amati 1000. Yes, a V12. Mazda, the relatively small automaker from Hiroshima, was about to join an exclusive club dominated by Mercedes, BMW, and Jaguar. For a company of Mazda's size, this was a statement of intent. We may not be the biggest, but we will be the boldest. The Amati project gathered momentum. Early prototypes hinted at designs that were sleek, modern, and distinctly different from Mazda's mainstream lineup. The marketing teams started drafting branding strategies, imagining gleaming showrooms that would rival Lexus. Dealerships in California and New York. For a moment, it felt like Mazda was on the verge of greatness. But behind this dream, cracks were already forming. Mazda was not Toyota. They didn't have bottomless reserves of cash. They were riding high on confidence, but not necessarily on financial stability. And just as Amati was preparing to make its debut, a storm was about to hit Japan's economy, one so severe that it would wipe Amati out before it ever saw the light of day. A V12 ambition. The jewel of Mazda's Amati project was undoubtedly the Amati 1000. This was meant to be Mazda's crown jewel, a car that would not just compete, but truly astonish the world. Under its hood, Mazda engineers developed a prototype 4.0-liter V12 engine. For perspective, Toyota's Lexus LS 400 used a V8. Mazda wanted to go 2 steps further. A V12 meant ultimate smoothness, effortless power, and prestige. It was the kind of engine usually reserved for the likes of Mercedes-Benz's S-Class, Jaguar's XJ12, or even Ferrari's Grand Tourers. But here's the twist. Mazda wasn't building this V12 to chase Ferrari-level performance. They wanted refinement. The Amati 1000 was envisioned as the quiet, commanding presence on the highway, a car that would glide rather than roar. The engineering behind this engine was nothing short of remarkable. Mazda, essentially, created the V12 by combining 2 of their V6 engines. It was a clever way to stretch their existing technology into something extraordinary. Early reports suggested the engine produced around 280 horsepower, which was competitive for its time, though not earth-shattering. But what made it special wasn't raw numbers, it was the idea, the fact that Mazda, a relatively small automaker, even dared to design a V12 luxury sedan spoke volumes about their ambition. Car magazines of the era speculated about the Amati 1000. Some insiders hinted that it could have been Japan's answer to the Mercedes S-Class, with Mazda's signature. Attention to driving dynamics making it more engaging than its German rivals. Had it launched, it might have rewritten perceptions of Japanese luxury all over again. Mazda also had plans for advanced features in the Amati lineup. Electronically controlled suspension systems for a smoother ride, premium interiors with genuine wood, leather, and high-tech gadgets. Distinctive styling that separated Amati from Mazda's mainstream models. It was bold, it was daring, and it was almost ready, but then the bubble burst. Japan's overheated economy collapsed in the early 1990s. Real estate prices plunged, stock markets tumbled, and consumer confidence evaporated. Automakers suddenly found themselves under intense financial strain. Toyota, Honda, and Nissan had the deep pockets to keep their luxury brands alive. Lexus, Acura, and Infiniti survived the storm. But Mazda, they simply couldn't afford the massive investment Amati required. Launching a new brand isn't just about cars, it's about billions spent on dealerships, advertising, and global support networks. Mazda realized they were stretching themselves too thin. The V12, the showrooms, the grand dreams, all of it became unsustainable, and so, before Amati could even launch, Mazda pulled the plug. The brand was quietly shelved, the V12 prototype locked away, and the Amati name destined to be a footnote in automotive history. For Mazda, it was not just a financial failure, it was an emotional one. They had come so close to redefining themselves, only to watch it slip away. The bubble burst when the dream shattered. The early 1990s marked one of the darkest economic periods in modern Japanese history. What was once called the Japanese miracle came crashing down in what is now remembered as the collapse of the bubble economy. For years, Japan's real estate and stock markets had been inflated to unsustainable levels. Companies borrowed aggressively, banks loaned money without restraint, and consumer spending soared. It looked like nothing could go wrong, but by 1991 the bubble popped. Property values dropped overnight. The stock market lost trillions in value. Banks found themselves drowning in bad loans. Consumer confidence fell to historic lows. Automakers, who had expanded rapidly during the boom years, were suddenly forced into survival mode. And for Mazda, this was devastating. Unlike Toyota or Honda, Mazda was not a corporate giant with deep financial reserves. It was smaller, leaner, and already spread thin with multiple projects. At one point, Mazda was developing 7 different model families simultaneously, far more than its size justified. The Amati project was the most ambitious of them all, and the most expensive. The timing could not have been worse. While Toyota could afford to keep Lexus alive through the downturn, and Honda had enough global presence to support Acura, Mazda simply didn't have the resources. Launching Amati would have required billions in marketing to build brand recognition, a separate dealership network across North America, massive investment in production facilities. Mazda executives were faced with a brutal choice: either protect the core Mazda brand and survive, or gamble everything on Amati and risk bankruptcy. Reality won. By 1992 to 93, the Amati project was officially cancelled. The flagship Amati 1000 sedan with its ambitious V12 engine never reached showrooms. The Amati 500 and 300 were quietly rebadged as high-end Mazdas or repurposed for other markets. It was a heartbreaking decision for the company's engineers and designers, many of whom had poured years into the project. They believed Amati could have put Mazda on the luxury map alongside Lexus and Acura. But the cold truth was unavoidable. Mazda simply couldn't afford the dream. The cancellation of Amati wasn't just a financial loss, it was a blow to Mazda's identity. The company had always prided itself on being different, on daring to do what others wouldn't. Amati was supposed to be proof of that boldness. Instead, it became a symbol of overreach. And yet, Mazda didn't give up. If anything, the collapse of Amati forced the company to rethink its strategy and return to its roots. The aftermath: how Mazda tried to recover. Mazda's cancellation of Amati left the company at a crossroads. They had spent years preparing for a luxury future that now no longer existed. So the question became, what next? The answer, as it turned out, was survival through reinvention. Number 1. Rebadging and reuse of Amati plans. Some of the cars developed for Amati didn't go to waste. The Amati 500, for instance, ended up being sold as the Mazda Millennia in certain markets. The Millennia was a sleek sedan filled with premium touches and even featured a unique Miller Cycle V6 engine, an innovative design that gave more efficiency and performance. The Millennia never reached the heights Mazda had hoped for with Amati, but it was a way to salvage some of the investment. It quietly carried the DNA of what was meant to be a luxury division, even if it wore a Mazda badge instead of an Amati one. Number 2. Ford's lifeline. By the mid-1990s, Mazda was struggling financially. Sales were inconsistent, and the burden of the early 1990s economic collapse lingered. The company found itself increasingly dependent on Ford Motor Company, which had already held a stake in Mazda since the late 1970s. During this era, Ford increased its ownership and influence, effectively keeping Mazda afloat. Mazda cars began sharing platforms and technology with Ford models, a move that ensured Mazda's survival but somewhat diluted its independence. Number 3. Back to the core identity. With Amati gone, Mazda realized it couldn't play the luxury game like Toyota or Honda. Instead, it needed to focus on what made it special in the first place, driving joy and innovation. The Miata MX-5 became the company's halo car, embodying Mazda's spirit of fun, lightweight engineering. The RX-7 carried the performance flag, appealing to enthusiasts. With its rotary power, even Mazda's mainstream sedans and hatchbacks leaned toward a more engaging, driver-focused experience than their rivals. This pivot wasn't immediate. Mazda spent much of the 1990s and early 2000s struggling to find its footing. But by the 2010s, the company would reinvent itself with the Zoom Zoom philosophy and the stylish KODO design language. In hindsight, the failure of Amati forced Mazda to accept its limitations and double down on its strengths. Where Toyota could be everything to everyone, Mazda learned it had to be something special to someone. Still, the ghost of Amati lingered. The Millennia, though elegant, never became a Lexus rival. Mazda never launched a true luxury division, and to this day, Mazda remains the only major Japanese automaker that tried and failed to enter the luxury market. For enthusiasts, this has always raised a tantalizing question. What if Amati had launched? Lessons learned and legacy. The story of Amati may seem like a failure on the surface, but when you peel back the layers, it becomes something deeper, a lesson in ambition, timing, and identity. Number 1. Timing is everything. Amati's greatest enemy wasn't its engineering or its concept, it was timing. Mazda chose to launch a luxury brand just as the Japanese economy was collapsing. Had the bubble not burst, perhaps Amati would have survived long enough to carve out a niche. In the auto industry, timing can make or break even the best ideas. Number 2. Resources matter. Toyota, Honda, and Nissan succeeded in luxury because they had the resources to sustain years of investment before seeing profits. Lexus, for example, took billions to develop and market, but eventually paid off. Mazda simply didn't have that financial cushion. Ambition without resources is like a race car without fuel. You can build it, but it won't go anywhere. Number 3. Know your identity. Mazda learned that it couldn't outspend Toyota or outmuscle Honda. What it could do was lean into what made Mazda unique. Its focus on driving pleasure, innovative engineering, and a sense of fun. From the Miata to the modern Mazda 3, the company built a reputation for making driver's cars that felt special even if they weren't luxury machines. Number 4. The legacy of Amati lives on. Although Amati never became a brand, its spirit did leave traces. The Mazda Millennia carried technology originally meant for Amati, including the Miller cycle, V6 engine. The V12 prototype remains a fascinating piece of Mazda history, often discussed by enthusiasts as a what could have been. Mazda's ongoing struggle with its brand identity, premium but not luxury, can be traced back to the Amati dream. Even today, Mazda positions itself slightly above mainstream but below luxury, a space it has occupied ever since Amati collapsed. In a strange way, Amati's failure shaped Mazda's long-term strategy. The company avoided spreading itself too thin again and instead doubled down on making stylish, fun-to-drive cars that punch above their weight. The dream that never drove. Mazda's attempt to launch Amati is one of the great what-ifs of automotive history. What if the Japanese economy hadn't collapsed? What if Mazda had managed to bring its V12 flagship sedan to market? Could we be talking today about Amati in the same breath as Lexus or Acura? We'll never know. What we do know is that Mazda dared to dream big, even when it didn't have the resources to back it up. And in that sense, Amati represents both the best and worst of Mazda, a company unafraid to take risks, but one that sometimes flew too close to the sun. Today, Mazda is respected for its design, its focus on the driving experience, and its willingness to stay different in a world of conformity. But buried deep in its history lies the ghost of Amati, a reminder of the time Mazda tried to join the luxury elite and fell short. Not every dream is meant to become reality. Some are meant to teach lessons. And Amati taught Mazda the most important lesson of all. Sometimes failure is the foundation for future success. If you enjoyed this incredible story, don't forget to hit the like button, share it with your friends, and subscribe to the channel for more epic automotive adventures. Your support keeps these stories alive.